the so since we are waiting for our students to come, they are in a class, so they'll be here in say 5-10 minutes. We thought that we get ourselves introduced. So if you're kind enough to sort of introduce yourself briefly, that will be very nice. We'll start from the left. Yes, please. Your name, your agency, or what you do.
Can you hear me? So my name is Rifatul Rahim. I currently work as a fellow for Globesight. So basically, I'm a colleague to Maisha and Shaitsa. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Sadia Hussain Mona, currently working as a research assistant at SIPG, North South University.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Mohammad Parvez Hassan Yusuf. I'm working as a research associate at SIPG. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Farin Shabnam Ritu, research associate of SIPG and lecturer of Department of Political Science and Sociology.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rudmila Khan. I'm currently working as the program officer of Center for Peace Studies of North South University.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Abdul Wahab. I'm a assistant professor in sociology, North South University, and also a coordinator at Center for Peace Studies, North South University. And welcome to North South University.
Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. This is Mustafa Kamal Akon from Coast Foundation. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. My name is Iqbal. I am from Coast Foundation. Thank you.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hassan. I am from Coast Foundation. I am working as a program head, climate resilience and program. Thank you.
Can you explain the BD coast, please?
No, now it is only coast. No acronym. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Mohammad Fakrul Hassan. I work at NSU TV as a video editor.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good morning. I'm Sam Mahfuzul Islam Tamal, currently working as an editor of NSU TV, radio, and digital lab. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Mohammad Shoaib bin Habib, and I'm currently working as a research assistant to the PhD Research Fellow, Noreen Rahim Ma'am, under the University of Oslo, Norway. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Noreen Rahim, and currently I'm working as a PhD Research Fellow at the Faculty of Law, University of Oslo. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good morning. My name is Lamia Mehzabin, and I'm currently working as a research assistant under the supervision of Zakaria sir at the Department of Environmental Science and Management at North South University.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Sheikh Shahriar Zaman. I'm a Bangla Tribune কাজ করি একজন সাংবাদিক. My understanding is that the audience is all Bengali, so I speak in Bengali. Next one. Oh, sorry. My name is Shahriar Zaman. I'm a journalist working in Bangla Tribune. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jamal. I'm the regional representative for South Asia and Southeast Asia with the Gates Foundation. Thank you for having me here.
Could we go back, please?
This is Saurabh Sutar. I am the recently graduate of PMPG program and working in a USAID funded project.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Akram Hussain. I am working as assistant professor at Department of Political Science and Sociology, North South University. Thank you.
All right, good morning and assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Ishtiaq Jamil. I'm professor at the Department of Government at the University of Bergen in Norway.
Assalamu alaikum and very good morning to all of you. I'm Joshimuddin. I'm a faculty of the Department of Political Science and Sociology of this university. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. We are waiting for some students to join us. We'll wait for another 5 minutes and then we'll start. And those who are on the web, would you like to introduce yourself? Please settle down quickly. We are waiting for you actually. Good. I think it's time for us to start the discussion. Today we are here to discuss climate change and displacement and resilience. The way we thought that we'll organize this particular session is we have a group of expert panelists who primarily work at the grassroots level, implementing various projects related to the climate change and displacement. We also have colleagues here from the very grassroots. So we intended to make the discussion more sort of a action-oriented, local level discussion rather than having an intellectual discourse, which we had actually about 3 months back, where we tried to frame displacement in the context of climate change. And there's a report available also. So this is an event that is jointly organized by a development agency called Globesight and North-South University. So we will have 2 colleagues from these 2 particular agencies to introduce them as an agency, and then we'll go into the panelists. Since we have already introduced ourselves, we would certainly not go into that. My name is Shahidul Haq. I'm a professor at the SIPG NSU and also a country advisor to the Globesight. We have a couple of colleagues joining. In fact, a whole Globesight team is joining us. Disha, Maisha, how many of them are there already? 15 plus. So they would they are listening. They are connected from various cities, just to keep you informed. So that's why we thought of conducting this particular event in English. But if someone strongly feels, please use the Bengali language as well. We'll be very happy to respond and take the debate on in both the languages, but it will primarily be in English. So before I sort of set the scene for our discussions, I will ask Professor Rizwan to say a few words in terms of welcoming, because this is their venue, and also sort of quickly brief us as to what SIPG in the North-South University has been doing for the last 15 years in terms of getting postgraduate studies. So you have the floor.
Welcome everyone to North-South University. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of the South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance. As Professor Shahidul has pointed out, SIPG is partnering this event with the Globesight. And SIPG, it's an institute within the North-South University, but its history goes back quite a while. It started off as a graduate program back in 2008 with Professor Ishtiaq, who's sitting in the back. He took the initiative of providing NORAD funding back then. So we started off with a master's program from 2008 till 2 years back. We have actually completed 10 batches. We're, inviting the 11th batch next semester. In addition to that, the SIPG also runs another master's program, an executive program called in EMPG, Executive and Master, Policy and Governance, which focuses on, arming providing skills to the private sector and the development partners. Mostly they are a small group, all the professionals. Besides the academic programs, SIPG has been engaged in the research and arranging policy dialogues with the government for a long time. We have actually, most of our master students are actually from the government of Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. So it's a South Asian context, and we had students from Brunei too. Apart from the academic programs, SIPG has been carrying a lot of research on areas of policy and governance for quite a while, from 2008 onwards, on the issue of governance and then trust. And we have a series of surveys that have been going on for quite some time. Right now, the institute has got two centers: the Center for Migration Studies and the Center for Peace Studies, and both the centers are actually quite active in having a lot of discourses and policy dialogues within this and within the institute itself. So it's quite appropriate that this session on climate change and resilience is being jointly hosted by SIPG and the Globesight, which will not only provide the students and the faculty of insights into the problems of climate change, displacement, and migration, and the resilience issues, but also probably come up with, I hope the panel will come up with, very pointed and from their experience, quite practical, policy insights and also practical recommendations that I think we can take up later on. And SIPG, just to, on the end of the SIPG, instead of, apart from publishing working papers, also publishes policy notes. I hope this will be also jointly policy note. I'll leave it to Professor Shahidullah on this thing. So with those, thank you for joining us and welcome all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Rizwan, for introducing SIPG to the participants. At this stage, I have to go on to the web. We have a senior colleague from the Globesight based in Dubai, Mrs. Marukh Shahid. Marukh, are you there? Who we hope introduce us to the Globesight.
Thank you, Shahid sir. So sorry, I was trying to unmute myself and now it's finally worked. So Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Marukh Shahid. As my colleague mentioned, I am an associate at Globesight. And to give you a brief introduction of the company, we are a strategy and advisory firm providing development partners and institutions with the expertise to scale development impact in the Global South, with a primary focus on the Middle East, South Asia, as well as Africa. Climate change, the topic for today as well, is a cross-cutting theme across our areas of expertise, whether it's global health, WASH, nutrition, gender equality, and financial inclusion. We believe that climate change is interacting with all of these issues now. And as the UAE, where our headquarters is based, is the host of COP28, one of our key priorities in the next 6 months is to plan and identify opportunities to convene and support South-South knowledge exchange. So this event today will be part of a series of convenings in the Global South to gather the voices and the opinions of experts from countries who are most affected and vulnerable to climate change, which includes Bangladesh. And so I am really excited that we're finally hosting this event, and congratulations to my team based in Dhaka as well. And over to my esteemed colleague, Professor Dr. Shahidul Haq, to kick off the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Maruf, and also welcome to our colleagues who have joined from the Globesight. I hope it will be interesting, and time permits, we will try and get some questions from them at the end. So we have a very distinguished three panelists. Starting with the farthest on the table is Ashfaqur Rahman, who has done studies in economics from the Dhaka University and joined IOM. He's a national program officer, actually heading the IOM Bangladesh's climate program. He's very informed and have a knowledge about the field. And then we have Professor Zakaria. When I come to him. I will introduce him. He's one of the authority in the climate change, and especially on some of the more specific areas of climate change. And then we have a very well-known, I don't know how to describe her, an expert, an activist. And she has been part of a Bangladesh delegation in various conferences where we have seen how active she could be. So we have Farah Kabir from the Action Aid. Before I give the floor to our colleagues, I thought, how do we frame this, particularly the climate displacement and the resilience? There are many ways one could look at this particular nexus. Now that it's well recognized that people do get displaced due to climate-induced forces and factors. Since we had a discussion earlier in the SIPG, again with the IOM, narrating the debate, the politics of that, because it's not clear-cut, the nexus. I thought that we'll look at the people who get affected by this particular phenomena, and this is something. If you look at the screen, we tend to call it a trapped population. This is a relatively new phenomena, came out of the field studies, that people who get affected by the climate displacement, either slow, ongoing, or a short, quick hit, not essentially all leave or can leave or should leave. Some of them stay back, and when they stay back, they don't move. They don't have the capacity to move or opportunities to move and go and start a new life somewhere else. They get trapped. In Bangladesh, there are these kinds of people who just cannot go anywhere and get trapped. So this is something we will be using as a frame to look at it. And this, if you look at on the left top, it's called, we have taken the vulnerability frame. So there are many vulnerability, not essentially in the environmental stress, but also the social stress, the political stress, and the rest of it. But when it works on a group of people, not essentially everybody moves. They continue to live in that area and thinking that, possibly things will be better next morning, and it's not the case. Some of them move and some of them do not move. So that's the kind of a frame that we'll use. And when they move, they become more vulnerable on the move. And that's where our panelists hopefully will focus. Now, there's something else we would like to bring in addition to this trapped population, is the whole issue of, should the displacement due to climate change form a part of the loss and damage discussions that currently taking place within the climate change larger debate. There's a strong civil society move globally to put this displacement or trapping of people due to climate change within the loss and damage, where they could possibly gain out of some of the mechanism that's being discussed and developed within the UNFCCC. Now, I thought that's a good idea. So we have local level intervention, but we have also global level debate, which will eventually help them to get back to the life. Now, so that's something I would urge our colleagues to look at, because Bangladesh is deeply involved into the loss and damage debate, which is still in the making. And as you know, then the Sharm el-Sheikh debate that featured quite prominently. So that's the two angles that we thought we'll take, so local and global. climate and displacement to look at it. I'm not sharing any statistics, but I do have, and which we'll share when we go deeper into it. So with this frame, with this idea, let's see what's happening in Bangladesh and what perhaps we could do to help the people. That's where our pivot is, is. So we have with us, as I say, Ashfaqur Rahman from the IOM and IOM Dhaka, who heads the IOM Dhaka Climate Change Program. I have seen him both in the field level and in the discussion level. So, sir, you have 10 minutes to share with us as to how your organization, or in general, how the problem is in Bangladesh. Over to you, Ashfaq.
Hello. Thank you very much, Professor Hawk. You have said the same very nicely. Distinguished panelists, participants, it's a pleasure for me to be here today. I think I alone is bringing down the average age of today's panel. Before I start, oh, sorry if I'm being
Going on 17.
So before I start, apologies from my organization. My Deputy Chief of Mission, Ms. Nusrat Ghazali, was supposed to be speaking here, but unfortunately, she was not feeling well. So here I am. So Professor Hawk has said the same quite nicely, that people are moving, people are getting trapped in disaster-prone and climate-vulnerable locations. And now I have a very difficult task in my hand. So I was asked to illustrate what we can do to address this problem. 10 years back, the situation was quite difficult because climate change and disaster leading to displacement and human mobility, that link was not quite established. So the problem itself was not acknowledged at the global level, at the regional level, at the sub-regional level, to some extent at the national level as well. But now in 2023, we see that yes, climate change, disaster leading to human mobility, and it's widely acknowledged, and it's often get referenced in COP decisions, declarations as well. So now that we have acknowledged the problem, it's time to identify what we can do about it, how we can manage the problem, who would take different actions, and when these actions needs to be taken. And I'll try to shed some lights onto this. And at the end, I'll try to illustrate what IOM Bangladesh is doing to assist the government of Bangladesh and other stakeholders to manage human mobility in the context of climate change and disasters. So before we start thinking how we should address the problem, we need evidence in our hand. And data builds the foundation of the evidence. Now, if I ask anybody, or in different forums where we have governments, development partners, if I ask, can you quote a figure, how many people in Bangladesh is currently displaced? The stock element of the data, there is no answer. If I ask how many people are moving every year due to climate change and disaster, there is no data. So the very first intervention before we start designing intervention would be data. So that data would give us an understanding of the scale, magnitude, breadth, and depth of the problem that would allow us, the government, development partners, and other stakeholders to come up with a series of interventions that would help people in need. The government of Bangladesh has recently enacted a national strategy on the management of internal displaced population. And that national strategy is followed by an action plan. That action plan identifies as 3 phases, and they group a series of interventions under these 3 phases. There's a set of interventions that the government and other stakeholders need to do before a disaster strikes, before climate stresses become more aggregated. And there's a set of interventions that the government and other stakeholders need to undertake when disaster is striking our country, people are getting hit, and when climate stresses have kind of reached a peak point. And there's a another set of interventions that people and the other stakeholders need to take when the disaster is over. So it's a pre-disaster, during disaster, and post-disaster phase. And if you Google the strategy and the action plan, you'd find around 80 to 85 activities. And it's kind of well identified who would take lead in identifying different activities, what time frame we are talking about, and is it a short-term, medium-term, or a long-term activity. So I would encourage everybody to just Google the national strategy and the subsequent action plan. So that kind of provides a guidance. Now, IOM, being the United Nations Specialized Organization on Migration, we have also given the issue a lot of thought. We are engaged in such programming from 1990. And we thought about clustering different solutions into three broad categories. There would be solution for people to move. There needs to be solution people on the move who are already moving. And there's another set of solutions for people who are left behind. So it's solution for people to stay in disaster and climate vulnerable locations. Now, there are underlying principles which behind the solutions, and the principles are broad-based partnership. We'd like to partner with all the relevant stakeholders, government, civil society, development practitioners, development partners, private sector, and also the diaspora community of Bangladesh who are residing in Middle East and on the western part of the world. Evidence-based policy making and action. So the intervention we design, they need to be guided by evidence and targeted approaches for specific group and communities with a focus on most vulnerable population. So that being said, let me try to give a bit of examples what the solutions can look like. So the solutions, the spectrum of solution, it starts with policy. So we need to have policies in place. So the government and the other stakeholders need to have a common vision how we will address the problem and what is our goal. Fortunately, the government has enacted a policy and there is an action plan, and we see policy coherence between different sectoral level policies, be it agriculture, be it disaster management, or climate change. We need to see how the urban centers, which is the primary destination of people who are moving due to adverse effects of climate change and disaster, we need to see how urban centers are better designed, how urban public service delivery are able to better target this vulnerable population in the move. We need livelihood because the primary stress, the primary vehicle of climate stressors affecting human mobility is through livelihoods. So my livelihoods get destroyed because of a disaster or climatic stresses. So I might try my luck in different livelihoods in the same area, or I can try my luck in urban centers, which provides a lot of opportunities, unfortunately, in informal sector. So skills is a very important thing. I'm sure many of you know that from Bangladesh, we send a lot of people to work in the Gulf countries and Southeast Asian countries, but majority of them are categorized as low skills. Why they're low skills? Bangladesh also ranks at the very top of graduate unemployment. Why we are topping the list of graduate unemployment? Because there is a big mismatch in our education system, in our skill development system with the labor market. So skills, targeting labor market internally, targeting labor market outside of the country to our traditional and non-traditional countries of destination, that is something which is very needed. Then we also need frameworks, guidance, standard operating procedures for planned relocation. I'm sure you have seen the news that the government has a vision that there will be no landless people. And they have invested a significant amount of resources to relocate a landless, displaced population. But what we feel that there are scope to further improve this relocation and resettlement schemes and scale up the coverage. So we are able to ensure that there is no landless, homeless, or displaced population, and they all have access to housing, land, and property rights. And when a disaster is striking or when people are moving, they require a different set of interventions. And these interventions often revolve around the humanitarian aid or humanitarian assistance. So we need to provide adequate healthcare, education, livelihood, protection, shelter, and non-food item support when they're displaced. And we need to find durable solutions for this displaced population, many of whom become permanent displacement because their house or land gets eroded away due to adverse effects of climate change or disaster. Now, for people who cannot, so for people who cannot move, for some reason, there are emotional attachments. They have graveyards of their ancestors there. They grew up there. Not everybody wants to move. So for this set of people, there needs to be another set of interventions. And it ranges from climate resilient infrastructure to ensure that there is less impact on the vulnerable population, livelihood support, so they get climate smart livelihood support, so they can adapt to the changing climate and adverse effect of disaster in their area of origin. At the same time, we need to see how the disaster risk reduction and climate change efforts at the vulnerable locations are incorporating displacement and human mobility elements. So I'm reminded by the moderator that I have very few minutes left. So that being said, I'll focus on what currently IOM Bangladesh is doing to assist the government and other stakeholders to manage the problem. We are creating a data ecosystem. So by first quarter of next year, IOM Bangladesh should be able to tell every stakeholder what is the baseline scenario of displacement and human mobility in Bangladesh. We'll work with government, National Statistical Agency, Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics to incorporate displacement and human mobility element into their regular survey and census. So the government itself would be able to produce systemic and methodical data over a regular interval. There would be no need for external assistance. So I'm personally allergic to the idea of capacity building. I don't think that the government lacks capacity. I prefer capacity exchange. So IOM being at the United Nations Migration Agency, we have global expertise in managing or governing human mobility in the context of disaster and climate change. And we are exchanging our capacity with government of Bangladesh so they are able to better manage such mobility. We're engaged in research and knowledge management activities. We're also piloting climate smart alternative livelihoods for internal and international migration. We are also toying with an idea how our diaspora community residing in United Kingdom can be linked to climate action in their area of origin. With that being said, my last point from me would be to stress the importance of funding to advance this agenda. We all know that Bangladesh is supposed to graduate from the LDC status by 2026. Natural consequence of that could be decreasing external assistance. So with that in mind, we need to find innovative mechanisms how we can mobilize funding to undertake the range of activities and many others I just mentioned. Yes, Bangladesh is developing, but at the same time, it has competing priorities and we only have very limited resources. So Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Defense, everybody wants money, right? So we need to see how we can mobilize more funds to address these challenges. And I look forward to private sector engagement, philanthropic contribution from our diaspora community, and of course, our traditional and non-traditional development partners to advance this agenda. And IOM Bangladesh is committed to work with member states like Bangladesh and if each one of you to advance this agenda further. Thank you.
Good, Ashfaq, for laying quite a good ground in terms of Bangladesh's issues, especially data and information, but also you have brought out that it's a governance issue. And when we bring the issue of governance into the migration, it brings what we essentially call away from the management concept is a rights issue. So I'm glad to hear that you're looking at that. Also, you're kind of making the intervention in sort of 3 cohorts. One is those who continue to stay, so that they do not become people of hell. Those who are on the move in terms of protections and others, and then once you go and stay somewhere, you don't end up in the slum and try and build a livelihood. So we have a fairly good idea as to how things could be done better. But the whole idea of governance is very critical. Now we have with us Professor Zakaria. As I said, that I'm going to sort of share with you as to where his expertise lies. Professor Zakaria is a professor of Department of Environmental Science and Management of the North-South University. And he worked as a lead researcher before joining as a professor for many national and international organizations. He has publications, I don't know how many, we have lost count of it. And before that, he was a contributor to the Sustainable Arsenic Mitigation Project with UNICEF. As you know, that at one stage, Bangladesh did face quite a challenge from the arsenic contamination, and he was known lead expert in that. Also, he will share with us. He's continued to remain in the field and see how people are reacting to the changing climate and environment. So you have the floor, sir. So you have I know you can go on and on. 10 minutes. It ঠিক করে দেন।
Thank you very much, Professor Hawk, for giving a very nice introduction about myself, though I'm not really, I feel myself not an expert, but I still prefer working both in the academic world, also in the field, in the development work. And I think the topic is very important, migration, the displacement, because we know that for the last 10, 15 years, whenever we are visiting fields, people are complaining that something is going wrong, right? The way they were adapted with their natural environment, these things are not working. So, and that's the climate change. So now it's a good thing also, if you see something going wrong, we can blame the climate change, we can blame the global warming. But it's really true that things are going wrong just because of the climate change issues. And this is a man-made disaster. So if we climate displacement, the topic here, people are moving. It's not that people are moving recently, people started moving from ancient times, but the way they were moving, the way they are moving now, it's a big differences. They are really facing a lot of difficulties. We know there are the factors, pull factors and the push factors for migration. And in the most cases, now we see that people are migrating not because that they are trying to get better opportunity. In most of the cases, they are migrating because they are really pushed by some factors, and these are the disaster, climate change. The debate is here, is that people moving due to natural disaster, or people are moving because of the climate-induced disaster? So that's a big debate. Professor Howard was mentioning about that. We really need to define that why people are migrating and the reason of migration. It's true, a disaster, but if you look at the nature of the disaster has been changed tremendously over the last couple of the last decades, and we can truly match that. This is not normal natural disaster. This is climate-induced disaster. But the problem here is, do we have enough statistics to qualify our arguments? So the IOM expert was telling we have serious lackings in the data. So this is absolutely true that we need to understand that why people are migrating and what is the the threat boundary between natural disaster and climate-induced disaster. And if you can have proper data, and it's not very difficult to resolve this confusion, and only then it will be easy for us to give something to the distressed population. Okay, spawn here. I know that Bangladesh is a climate victim country. We all know that. There are a lot of statistics here. You can find that if the temperature rises by, 1 degree, then we'll be losing our southern belt. The 50-meter sea level rises, will be completely losing our southern belt. There are 17 to 18 million people. Do we have the luxury to accommodate this large number of people somewhere else in Bangladesh? We don't have that actually. So we also know that there are, displacement because of the flood and the scarcity of water is also a major issue. Drought is a major issue. These things are emerging seriously in the last couple of years, like 10, 15 years, because whenever we go to the field, people mention that the flood is a major problem, drought is a major problem, scarcity of water. So these things, as I mentioned earlier, that people somehow manage those things in the past, but now they can't manage the excess flood, they can't manage the drought because there is no synchronization they used to have in the past. Synchronization is lost. The farmer, they knew that when flood water will come, and that's how they adjusted their normal life cycles and everything. But these things are not really following the way they used to practice all these things. So that's why you can see here the cyclone is a major problem in the southern belt. And there is a projection that over 7.1 million Bangladeshi will be displaced by the climate change in 2022, but would be sort of 13.3 by 2050. It's a huge number, and I'm sure we'll not be able to manage this number if they really become distressed or if they become really displaced. As I mentioned here, that local level adaptation techniques are failing. So this is the major problem. So that's why they need support, financial and technical, from the expert. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for them to continue with their traditional livelihood practices, right? So that's why it is very important that we need to understand why the traditional adaptation techniques are failing. Bangladesh is an example in the world that is a country of adaptation. But if you go back to the rural life, that you will find that they are really struggling with their normal adaptation techniques. So what's really going on there? It's really important to understand, and how people can maintain their livelihood is also very important to understand their situation, right? So this way, migration is really taking place, and to understand, to develop strategy, to develop policy, all requires funding, right? And also the proper strategy. So I'd like to draw your attention here that the global community, they promised us that in 2009, that we'll be getting about how much billion? About 100 billion a year since 2009, but it's to 2023. So are you getting anything from them? So it's really shame that we all know that global warming, climate change, our responsibility is very negligible, but the contribution is coming from the first world country. So that's why it is their responsibility to compensate our problem by giving the proper financial support. So it was a commitment, but unfortunately, we are not getting any. We all know that, as I mentioned, the traditional the methods are not working. Normal adaptation techniques are not working. So what would be the next methods? How they will sort of continue with their livelihood activities? So their technical support is required. In some cases, a lot of strategies needs to be adopted, needs to be identified. So for all these things, financial support is very important. So, but we are unfortunate that we are not getting any resources, but we should not stop ourselves doing things. So I'm sure Bangladesh government and others, they are trying to put their the resources and efforts to come up with innovative strategies to make our vulnerable communities safer. So you know that the vulnerability and migration, I think unplanned migration is a major problem. So migration is an opportunity. Migration is a fundamental human rights, but unplanned migration is the problem. So it creates the lots of problems. For example, unplanned migration means the slums, like the Dhaka city. The first choice for all is come to Dhaka because they know that they will at least get something to maintain their livelihood. So that's where the problem is, because Dhaka, the carrying capacity of Dhaka is already exhausted. So we really need to sort of develop planned migration. Otherwise, you see that people will be sort of moving from one place to save themselves from disaster, but they will be ended up with another disaster, and they'll also put others in the disaster vicious cycle. So that's why it is very important we need to develop planned migration strategy. You know that the migration, you see that it's also a strategy for survival. We all know that at the last resort, that if we face something difficulties, then we can sort of, if we come back, at least we get something. And also migration is also an adaptation strategy. Some of the better of people, they come to better places to see that the more opportunities there. So that's why that is another strategy. And the third one is Professor Hawk mentioned about the trapped population. There are people in various disaster hotspot areas, they really can't move actually because of their financial issues, because of the connection issues. And there are so many other factors I've seen in his slides. So this understanding this factor is really important because these are the most vulnerable people. We cannot leave them alone. We really need to understand what are their problems and how to solve their problems, right? So these are the three issues we can think of while developing appropriate migration related strategy. And it's not that, as I mentioned, that we are not getting fund, but from the international community, but everyone in the country, including government, the donors and NGOs, they are really active in developing strategy, providing resources. For example, in Bangladesh, you have a Delta plan. We know how to sort of tackle the situation, and in every places in the disaster-prone areas, Bangladesh government developed NAPA. Sort of, they also identified I was observing some that 80 or 70 or 80 different kinds of strategies to tackle these particular disaster, climate change, and displacement issues. And there are a large number of NGOs are also working in this area. I can sort of mention the name of the BRAC and ICAD. They are also trying to develop, the climate resilience and migration-friendly towns. Basically, they are targeting the secondary towns where people can move rather than haphazardly moving in different places. I also seen that some of the interesting initiative by ActionAid. It's not that Professor, it's not that Dr. Farah Kabir is here, that's why I'm mentioning it, but it's really I really amazed that the work they are doing is fantastic. They identified climate resilience centers and they are providing support to the people, which is absolutely required. So the plan migrate to promote the planned migration. And you see that Professor Hawk was asking me to think about that, what would be the possible research areas in this particular area, because North-South University is a very research active university. We have fantastic the faculty members across the university who can help us in developing different innovative strategies. So the first possible thing would be here that we need to define resolve the that climate change migrant issues, right? That's the first fundamental things. And I'm sure, as I mentioned, we need to develop data, have proper data to address this particular issue. I think we need to assess the carrying capacity of the different cities that we are targeting properly so that we don't end up with a disaster again. We can also conduct research to develop strategies and appropriate policies to facilitate the planned migration. We can promote the concept of climate smart agriculture, because recently we conducted a study, the climate smart agriculture, because you know that traditional agriculture practice is not really giving them the community the better support. So they really they've already changed their traditional agriculture practice to new agricultural methods that we have seen through our study. But the problem is it's not well recognized by everyone. There is no coordination among different stakeholders. So that's why it is very important to promote this kind of idea so that people don't lose their primary income. We can also think of the zero migration policies, right? Zero migration means recently I was in my village, then I organized a group of youth, and I was thinking of giving them computer training so that they can be engaged in the freelancing services. And I found that there is huge interest in this particular initiative. So if you can promote this kind of initiative at the village level, so people will never move to other areas for their income issues. Develop plan and also the land acquisition process. We know that we have fantastic opportunity that it's a huge sedimentation process. Bangladesh is a lower riparian country, so a huge number of sediments are coming, depositing in the southern belt, right? So if you develop the planned sedimentation acquisition process, like the example here, the Vasanchor is also accreted land. So if you design this sedimentation process in a planned way, then we'd be able to sort of reclaim a lot of areas from the sea where we can probably target the people who are really becoming vulnerable and need to migrate. Right, so And the last slides here, you see that we can also think of establishing climate research centers at different climate hotspot areas for conducting several things, like develop detailed database on displacement population. As also I am expert mentioned about that. We can use the mobile application techniques to collect this data on a regular basis. So Northside University can help in doing that as well. Conduct research to promote nature-based solution to reduce migration. I think if you can sort of target the wetlands and others, so people, the area will not be flooded and people will not be required to move. So we can target those nature-based solutions as well. Develop early warning system for different hazard-prone areas to reduce vulnerability. We have recently got a funding from IDRC Canada, $1.5 million. There we'll be targeting developing early warning system for tidal surge. We know the Southern Belt, the warning is only for cyclone, but no one see that giving them warning for the tidal surge, which is really every month it's happening. So if you can sort of give them the notice that these are the places where embankment, there's a possibility embankment will be breached, why don't you take some preparation to strengthen the embankment in those locations, then that will help them in sort of securing their land from being saline and intruded by salinity, and thereby they would be able to save their livelihood, and it will definitely will reduce migration. So that's why you see the location specific, the warning system is really important. And the last one is develop capacity enhancement program for the families of the migrants. You know that when migration disaster strikes, the male peoples are not at home. So because they are out at the work, right? So only the female and the children's left behind, and they really need to tackle all the hassles without having little capacity. They don't have capacity, financial and technical, and also the administrative or whatever capacity you mentioned here, you can name, but they don't have anything. But they face all the disasters. So if you sort of develop a strategy to enhance or to empower these women and children to face the disasters alone, that will be a tremendous support. We need to identify these issues and we need to provide support so that they become resilient in terms of securing managing their life in a sustainable way. So I think these are some of the areas where we can probably discuss more how to develop different strategy. And as I mentioned, we are Northside is a research focused university. We probably would be able to help others, whoever is interested, if you get required financial support, right? And Northside University is also very keen to provide. So because we have a matching fund system at Northside University. So if you get funding from others, I'm sure Northside University would be willing to provide support as well, because they are also providing research grants to the faculty members. So I think these are the ways we can collaborate and we can develop a fantastic strategy to develop sustainable Bangladesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Zakaria, for bringing in the whole idea of planned relocation, which is globally accepted method of addressing climate displacement. We remember the Copenhagen Declaration 13F, but mostly it has not been implemented. So something the Bangladesh government has been trying, because they realize that there is not enough international interests or resources for planned relocation. Some of the Pacific countries are already moving into that, including Maldives. But the government of Bangladesh is also kind of using the same principles and methods of 13F and see whether we can do it in Bangladesh. So that's a good idea. But also the whole idea that possibly we are yet to know as to what is expected out of the government, out of the academicians and the civil society in terms of helping them. And we talk about it and feeling that there are 10 many other issues. So this is one. But let me give you one statistics which suggests that Bangladesh is the 7th largest climate displaced risky country. 7th. So pretty up in the list. Recently, German Watch came out with the statistics. They were looking at some of the important vulnerable countries, and they come with the statistics that by 2050, Bangladesh could have about 19.9 million displaced people, primarily due to climate-induced disasters. So 19.9. Yeah, I mean 19.9 to be very precise. I'm not going to say 20 if they have said 19.9. So that's one, and also the World Bank Groundswell report also corroborate that. So it's a pretty challenging situation that we are in. And thank you for bringing in the Delta Plan. In fact, Delta Plan deals pretty extensively with the coastline situation. And I know last month there was the first Delta Plan countries, Delta Plan supporting countries got together in Netherlands, finding resources and expertise as to now that we have it, what we do next. So that's also something, a good way of helping people who live in the coastline and quite vulnerable to the climate conditions to help. So that's the two things that we take from you, in addition to your focus on the research. Now we have with us Ms. Farah Kabir, head of ActionAid. Farah Appa has been very active in many fields. We see the visibility not only in Bangladesh but also globally. She had a stint in London, UK ActionAid, and she's someone who is down to earth and really talks taking the clue from the voice of the people. So you have the floor. Thank you.
হ্যাঁ ওটা বাংলায় বলে নিতে চাচ্ছিলাম a very good morning. There's been a discussion about displacement, and those of us who've not been displaced sometimes have difficulty understanding what it means to be displaced. Now, is there anyone from Pabna? Kuakata, Kolapara, Satkira? Any one of you? No. Okay, so when I joined ActionAid in 2007, I had little understanding of climate change, and my understanding was based on more about conservation, recycling, but I really didn't know what and how it could impact people. The first time I came and I went to Badarchor in Pabna, I met Akhtar Banu, and she said that in the last couple of years, she had to move 25 times. Why? Because of the river erosion, part of her house was getting collapsing and going into the water, into the river. So that was my first opening and realization. ActionAid started working in Bangladesh in 1983 in areas called Bhola, Chorfashan, Monpura. Now everybody knows the movie Monpura, but there is actually a place called Monpura. And that's where we started working. And that's where we went in after floods and cyclones. And we saw how people were displaced. And then I came to Satkira, which is, again, a very hot spot. And a lot of interventions is going on today in Satkira. And then last year, it was about the Haur. It was about Bishamburpur. It was about Sylhet. And they had 2 rounds of floods within 40 days, which they had never experienced in their entire, I mean, those people who are alive cannot remember something like that. Anyone from Bishamburpur, Sylhet? No. Okay. So we are it's difficult, but it is the reality of a lot of people on the ground. So we've already established, my previous speakers have already established that the climate displacement and vulnerability is very high. Unfortunately, establishing this took us a good 10, 12 years. When we started talking about it in 2008 and 10, it was very difficult for both national political actors and global political actors to accept it. It took a lot of persistence and advocacy and lobbying. But I'm glad to say that it has reached a stage where the conversations are happening. Now, when the conversations are happening, we are throwing around figures. The World Bank says 13.3 million people are going to be displaced. German Watch is saying 19.9 million. Now, these are not statistics. These are human lives human beings, children, women, persons with disability, what are the actions that we can take? Because climate change is happening, is a reality. Took 10 years to get there, but the IPCC reports, activism, scientific findings, research have established that. So if there's land loss, there's water level rising, cyclones, floods, unprecedented heat. Bangladesh is celebrated for our early warning and a disaster management. But Bangladesh didn't know how to deal with heat and 45 degrees temperature because it wasn't there. It has come on us now. We have to deal with it. And do you know when you say that the temperature has increased to 42 or 45, it's just not a number. It means you're sweating, you're suffering, you're getting dehydrated. UNICEF statistics yesterday was showing that 17 lakh young children, adolescents are suffering from respiratory problems. So that's what happens when climate change and extreme weather happens. So then if we are talking about all the different impacts, I'm not going to go into it. It's already been discussed by my previous speakers. You lose your land, you lose your source of water, you lose your livelihood, you lose your health issues, social and economic losses happen. And that's why Bangladesh, people like ourselves kept on harping on the issue of loss and damage. And the last COP became the loss and damage COP. It wasn't easy, and the international community, the global leadership is still dragging their feet. And as you have heard, there was a promise of 100 million, and we haven't even reached 30%. So we're a long way to go from there. So then what happens? How do we address these issues? We really wanted to come up with statistics and evidence. That's why ActionAid and CANSA, which is the Climate Action Network South Asia, together we worked in 4 countries and tried to bring out the statistics and information about displacement. Because I can go and talk to a politician or a minister and they will say, how do you know? This is anecdotal, give me evidence. So we had to do those studies, and we came up in 5 districts and identified how people were being displaced. And that's when we talked about people-centric solution. Because what will apply and work in Kuakata, Kolapara, Gorashal may not work in Satkira and Khulna. So we have to be sensitive. And yes, Bangladesh has adaptation policies, but there's a limit to adaptation. The rest of the world will keep emitting and polluting, and we will keep adapting. There has to be a time, there has to be an accountability where you have to, like I refuse to take plastic bottles, but you have all got plastic bottles. And there's only 9% of plastic being recycled. So that's harming your water sources, your land, it's not degradable, and it's polluting, just as your cars are polluting. As this country is talking about moving to a mixed transition energy system, and then it issues 1,000 permits per cars every month. And I'm sure all of you young people, your aspiration is to have the latest BMW and Mercedes. Why? Because that's the narrative that exists in our society. Success means you get an education, you get a graduation, get a job, buy your first car, buy your first house, and live the life that the West has left, or the rest of the world that is supposed to be progressive has left. But these progressive nations have damaged our environments. Now, when I want to talk about Bangladesh, there are a lot of strategies happening because of consistent, persistent groups, individuals, academics, policymakers, that we have seen adaptation policy, Delta plan, we have got the Mujib prosperity plan. I want to draw your attention to 2 things. One is, none of our speakers talked about the diversity of people that need to be understood when you want to talk about climate justice and climate solutions. Because it doesn't impact girls, boys, women, persons with disability, indigenous community, the Hijra community, transgender, it doesn't impact them. If you're already disadvantaged, if you're already in a marginalized position, your vulnerability multiplies by 100. And in climate change, erratic weather does not select, it impacts everyone, but these groups are impacted triply. That's number one. Women, children, girls, they are losing out not only from their right to education, food, economic, but social injustice, early marriage, urinary tract infection, reproductive health being affected. All this is happening because of the climate change, the erratic weathers, the extreme temperatures, and we need solutions for that. My other point is that South Asia needs to work together. Actually, emissions are happening somewhere else. We are emitting, but our emission is 0.5% of whatever the global emission is. We have to be smart that we don't repeat the mistake made by the rest of the industrial world, the Annex A countries and so-called developed countries, because I wonder if they're really developed. If you look at what's happening in the UK and the austerity measures and climate change impacted, what's happening in the US, every month there is a disaster. There's floods, there's snow, there's unexpected melting of the snows, the Himalayas. So we can talk about it at length. But the point that I'm trying to make is that South Asia, it's high time that they come together and talk about an integrated approach to climate-induced vulnerabilities. Instead, what we talk about is nationalism, our borders. We are very Zionist. We suffer from xenophobia. We are trying to show that we are very nationalist, but climate change and its impacts does not bother about our national sentiments. It's impacting all of us across Asia. It's impacting all of us across the world. We need to come together. Young students, you need to create platforms. You need to do networking and come up with solutions. The likes of me, who's 60 plus, we're going to go away in a couple of decades, and you are the ones who will have to live through this. So try and come together. Let the old narratives of geopolitics go out of the window and create a new narrative where you talk about climate justice, you understand climate vulnerability, you look at the women and the girls and the persons with disability and the marginalized and come up with those solutions. Otherwise, we'll be here back next year still talking about climate injustice.
Thank you very much, Ms. Farah Kabir, for your very passionate plea to our younger colleagues. But somehow or other, I feel that we need geopolitics the way we need geo-environment. So both are equally important for survival of the state and the people. Good. But I take two of your very important area, which is called diversity of people, not that climate impacts everyone in the same manner. Those who live in a urban area and those who live in the coastal zones, impact is absolutely different. In the midst of a cyclone, you don't have to rush with everything to the shelter. So that's one. And also, she has brought the whole issue of South Asian perspective. Absolutely correct. In fact, there has been a number of attempts to do something regional and sub-regional. Somehow they didn't work. And if you look at South Asia, all the South Asian countries, barring Bhutan, I think extremely vulnerable to climate change. Whether it is Pakistan, whether it is India, Bangladesh, Nepal, even Sri Lanka. But somehow or other, we fail to see how much we would gain if we collectively look at this one. There has been some attempts by the SARC, but it hasn't been able to make the impact that it should have. So that's two. With this, we'll open the floor. We'll take questions, and I would suggest that try and be brief so that we can take more questions, but that will be the voice also of the participants, and then we'll go to the web if anyone's interested to take the floor. So the floor is open, and you can ask specific questions to a particular panelist, or you can sort of throw a general one, and then we'll try and address. We'll take 3 to start with, and then come back to the panelists. Thank you. Yeah, please. If you just say where from.
I'm Shahriar Zaman. I'm a journalist working in Bangla Tribune. My first question to Professor Jakaria, you talked about zero migration and smart agriculture. My understanding is that it will not work as far as erosion is concerned. Maybe it is applicable to drought and other things, but you are talking about zero migration, but how you don't have migration when you have erosion? That's my first point. And the second one is you mentioned that you organize a discussion among a group of people where you taught them or encouraged them to have computer education. A few days back, I went outside Dhaka, and for the computer education, maybe you talk about freelancing and other things, but you need internet connection and other things. How far it is practical application to teach them computer and other things rather than smart agriculture? That is my one thing. And also, I want to ask Ms. Farakubin, you talk about heat. Heat is not a statistics. It's many things. We saw it in the last couple of days. So you also said that Bangladesh is not prepared for that. We have early warning system and many other things. How we can cope up? I mean, this is not the first time we are going to see this. Maybe in the next year and or so, we'll also feel this heat wave. How Bangladesh can be prepared for this heat wave thing? I'm pretty much sure this will happen in the next year or so. Thank you.
Anyone else? Do I see hands from our? Yeah, please.
This is Saurabh, Executive USAID project. So it is not actually the question, it is the proposal, which is that this is the event which is actually beyond the control of Bangladesh, because years after years, the first world nation emitted so much carbon and Bangladesh is the major victim of it. So, so I think Bangladesh should coordinate more with the international community, which is external, and community mobilization and awareness building initiatives should be the internal initiatives in order to educate all sorts of people about the climate changes and disasters. So in order to get rid of this terrific situation, I think
your question, please.
My question is that does Bangladesh government rigorously collaborate with international community, and to what extent? Thank you.
Thank you. One more to come back to the panel. Do we? Yeah, please.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Iqbal and I am from Coast Foundation. I need your permission because I came here with some statements, so it's not questions. So if you allow me 1-2 minutes, then I can explain.
Please go ahead, but because of the time constraint,
yeah, thank you, sir.
You could be brief.
I will be speaking both in Bengali and English, so that we can understand well. For example, the government has the plan and policy. But what I have seen from my perspective, because you are a research organization, so probably that will be helpful to understand. The one criticism is that the listing. We know in Bangladesh, কোনো লিস্টই আসলে এই পর্যন্ত বিতর্কের বাইরে নয়. So I will request to identify the real people. So one recommendation. The second thing, in the action plan, the security and action plan, in that sentence it says, বাস্তুচ্যুতি হওয়ার সাথে সাথে পরিবার এবং ব্যক্তিগত পর্যায়ে নিবন্ধন সম্পন্ন করতে হবে. Why should we wait until they migrate? Why not it's before? So that is my question. Second thing, we see very little participation from the ground. What is that? The consultant, with some consultation, prepared these documents, the policy and the action plans. But one of my experience, Sarapa is here, and the Coast Foundation emerged from Action Aid, Bhola project. So while I was in Bhola, আমি একটা গভর্নমেন্টের প্রজেক্টের ইয়েতে ভিজিট করতে গিয়েছিলাম, সেখানে গিয়ে দেখলাম একটা আদর্শ গ্রাম, এটা আপনারা জানেন সারা বাংলাদেশে হয়েছে। হোয়াট এ মিস্টেক! সেখানে একজন মুচি আছেন এক চরে, ঢাল চর। সেই মুচি সেখানে থাকতে চান না কেন? তার পেশা, সে তো ওখানে থেকে চরের মধ্যে জুতা সেলাই করতে পারতেন না, কিন্তু লিস্টিংটা হয়েছে ওইভাবে। সো আমি বলবো যে পার্টিসিপেশন কতটুকু হয়েছে, রিয়াল পার্টিসিপেশন, যেটা তার লাইভলিহুড, সে ওখানে থাকবে না। কিন্তু যখন আমরা স্ট্যাটিস্টিক্স দেবো, আমরা কিন্তু সত্যি বলবো যে না, আমরা এতজন লোককে রিহ্যাবিলিটেট করেছি। সো এই ফল্ট গুলো আমরা একটু দেখবো, এবং আমরা সত্যি মানুষের যে পার্টিসিপেশন সেটা কতটুকু হয়েছে আমরা রিসার্চে এটা দেখবো। আরেকটা জিনিস আমি একটু বলি, কোস্ট ফাউন্ডেশনের একটা খুব ভালো অভিজ্ঞতা আছে এই ডিসপ্লেসমেন্ট ঠেকানোর ক্ষেত্রে। আপনার সাস্টেইনেবল এমব্যাঙ্কমেন্ট ম্যানেজমেন্ট, যারা বাস্তুচ্যুত, আমাদের এখানে রিসার্চার IOM থেকে ভাই বলেছেন যে তাদেরকে ওই জায়গাটায় দিয়ে দাও, এবং তারা ওই 1 একর 1.5 একর জায়গা তারা মেনটেন্যান্স করবে। যদি বাঁধের কোনো ক্ষতি হয়, তারা ওটা মেরামত করবে তার বিনিময়ে। লস এন্ড ড্যামেজ ফান্ডের কথা এখানে বলা হয়েছে, আমি একটা ক্রিটিক করি, এবং আমি এই ক্রিটিকটা হচ্ছে যে এরকম যে কতদিন, হাউ মাচ টাইম উই উইল রিসিভ দিস ফান্ডিং। ইটস নট সামথিং ইফেক্টিভ ফর আস। আপনি আমাকে ইনজিওর করবেন, আমার যে লস বা ড্যামেজ হলো তার জন্য কয়টা পয়সা দেবেন, আবার আমাকে ইনজিওর করবেন, তার জন্য কয়টা পয়সা দেবেন। আমরা মনে হয় ঠিক আছে, এটা হয়তো ফর টাইম বিং, আমি স্যার আপনাকে খুবই প্রশংসা করছি তার এই বক্তব্যটার জন্য, যে ফর টাইম বিং ফারা আপার এই বিষয়টা খুব ভালো লেগেছে। ফর দ্য টাইমিং এটা হতে পারে, বাট নট ফর এভার। সো ওই জায়গাটায় আমরা একটু রিসার্চের ক্ষেত্রে যদি খেয়াল করি, অনেকগুলো রিসার্চ আমরা করেছি, আবার নতুন রিসার্চ আমরা করছি, বাট দ্য প্রবলেম ইজ the 80% recommendations have already been made the previous research. আমরা কিন্তু ওইটা সংশোধন করছি না, আমরা নতুন নতুন জিনিস ইনভেনশন করছি। তো যেগুলো অলরেডি মেনশন করা আছে, আমাদের ওই জায়গাগুলো ইমপ্লিমেন্টেশনের জন্য দিতে হবে। এইটুকুই আমার মনে হয় সংক্ষেপে।
থ্যাংক ইউ,
ধন্যবাদ।
থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ। সো উই হ্যাভ is there, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, this was a nice discussion, I believe. My name is Abdul Wahab, sociologist at the Department of Political Science and Sociology, North-South University. Maybe my question would be a little bit provocative, because some of us, we believe in climate change, some of us, we don't. From the academic perspectives, you know, we've been spent more than 20 years, right? From, 1995 in Berlin, that's the time the COP1 started. And last year we had COP27 in Egypt. So there is a group of people, especially after 2016 election in America, Donald Trump become president. They believe there is climate change is a myth. I wouldn't say the other word, would be a little bit different dialects. So from that context, it's been going on over and over. It hasn't been done that much. Farapa, he's my favorite always. I hear always from her. So today she also raised these issues. Maybe next time we'll come back and talk about this climate change, and the temperature will go up and down. And then that will not be the resolving issues in our country or in the global context as well. So how are you gonna, we need to have a political consensus.
Point it.
The question is how are you gonna, the people don't believe in climate change. And do you think the political consensus needed to resolve these issues? Otherwise, this continued debate will go on and on. So I would love to hear from both academicians. Zakaria sir is here, and also Farah will be here.
Thank you very much. I think Farah need to go for something else. So we'll give the floor to Farah to start with, and then we'll see. But very good debate. But I think the debate got resolved quite a long time back. Anyway, so reminding us, there was a debate at one stage whether there is a climate change to start with, or it's very natural.
Very good point. There'll always be believers and non-believers. I think where we are today, we don't have the time, the luxury to go into that debate, because the impact of climate change on the communities that I work with, on me as the individual who lives on this earth planet, I don't think we have the luxury to debate on that. So we will always have groups of people. You can't have 100% consensus. So that's not the worrying part. What is important now is how do you deal with and address the impacts of climate change? Because you will have the likes of Donald Trump and many other groups and many academics also. So I would suggest the important point is how do you address? Because you can see erratic climate, you can see river erosion, you can see weather patterns changing. I was in Geneva in Switzerland the other day. They said the snows are melting. The whole industry, tourism industry, skiing, they are suffering. Himalayas, it's melting. You can go and talk to anyone. We are the lower riparian. We are all being impacted. So I don't think that on the ground, there's a scope for it. It would be a waste of time and energy and resources. We need solution. I want to take up this. I would also debate that there cannot be ever a zero migration. Migration is a human right. It's my choice if I want to make. What you may work for is providing people who are displaced because of the impacts of climate change with the option. But if we say that there should be zero migration, I would have serious problem because migration is a right. Yes. So we have to understand that. What we mean is the displacement because of climate induced changes. That's where we have to work. My last point is we're not looking for smart agriculture. That is again the corporate narrative. We're looking for sustainable, resilient agriculture, where you want to support smallholder farmers, indigenous communities, you want to work with indigenous crops, you want to come up with those solutions. Because when you talk about smart, it seems that there is a tendency to go for hybrid, GMO, quick production, and that has not worked. So perhaps the narrative should be climate, resilient, sustainable agriculture.
Thank you. Thank you. Ashwat?
We
can go without my permission.
I cannot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very interesting discussion. So I've jotted down a couple of points and try to illustrate my thoughts. So zero migration, I think the idea of zero migration, unfortunately, is featured in one of our policies. If you look at the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, it aims to make migration zero by 2030. Whether that is achievable or not, it's a different debate. Time will tell. There is some questions about livelihood, smart agriculture, and computer. I think often the development practitioners like us, we do a serious mistake. We do income generation and livelihood activities without proper market assessment, which has led to a situation where instead of helping beneficiaries, actually we are doing harm. So say, for example, in the north, I think we have promoted pumpkin production in chore areas for decades without thinking, is there an adequate market to accommodate big harvest of pumpkin? There isn't. So when we design livelihood or income generation activities, it's always very important to think about the market aspect for linkage, backward linkage, and which we have not done in the past. I'll be very quite open with you. There was a question about interaction with international community. I'm sure Professor Hawk is the best person to respond to that. But very quickly, we led platform on disaster displacement and intergovernmental consultative process. It has 27 plus another 27 member states coming from EU. So Bangladesh was the chair of PDD back in 2019. And when Professor Hawk was the foreign secretary, he held the South Regional consultation for the Nansen initiative. It was another global consultative process. They came up with a protection agenda endorsed by 119 countries. If you're interested, please go have a Google it on the website. Registration on displacement, yes, very needed, but how the database would be managed, what is the security aspect, deserves further discussion. There was a discussion on climate finance and loss and damage fund. I personally think that there is no scope to be emotional or sentimental when it comes to climate finance. yes, we didn't contribute to climate change. Yes, we are vulnerable. We need fun. But that shouldn't supersede the fact that to access climate finance, you need to have certain capacities. It takes multidisciplinary capacity and 3 to 5 years to develop a GCF or GEF proposal. Our civil servants, their life is, they have a transferable job. So you cannot expect 15 civil servants coming from 15 different backgrounds will be posted in the same position for 3 to 5 years so they can develop a GCF proposal. So our capacity to accept, yes, climate finance is low, but our capacity to access dedicated climate finance is also low. So I think that is another area we can focus on, increase capacity to access climate finance. I think that's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Professor Zakari.
The warning that we need to really close it. So I think the two questions towards me is basically zero migration is not that we all know that it's not possible, but to draw the attention that whatever we can do to reduce the migration, I think the focus is here, not to stop migration, because migration is a human right. So people is migrating, people will be migrating. And the issue is the climate smart agriculture and organizing the youth is basically helping them to stay back because they are facing difficulties. When a farmer loses their agriculture, only the income sources year after year, then he will have no way but to leave the places. But if you sort of change the strategy from traditional agriculture to climate smart agriculture, Farapa mentioned that climate smart agriculture means introducing the GMO hybrid. I think it's not that actually, because we have seen in the field, people are bringing in a lot of new ideas. They are not simply cultivating rice, they are also cultivating vegetables, whatever is possible from their end. So you know that they're diversifying. So in a sense, it's good because we promoted monoculture, but in the name of climate smart agriculture, they are diversifying, which is absolutely good from environmental point of view. Organizing youth is possible because you all know that Sheikh Russell computer is the financing opportunity from government. So, and many schools, secondary schools got this funding and they got laptop from government. So my school at the village, they also got this funding, and there is 11 laptops. So with the help of these laptops, I'm organizing the youth and the students from Northside University Computer Science and Engineering Department, they will be training those youth so that they become knowledgeable in terms of sort of securing job from outside. So that's my target actually. But I saw huge enthusiasm from the youth community to become part of this initiative. But I'm hoping that this will be a big campaign and a big issues in my village. So I'm planning that at some point it will be an IT village. And if you can promote this idea in other places, I'm sure it will be an opportunity for the youth to stay back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are coming close to the end. If there is no one, no more hands here, yes, please.
Hello, sir. I'm going to target a very specific area as there is no time. So আমি যেটা বলতে যাচ্ছিলাম, I'll continue in Bangla and English both. So ম্যাম যেহেতু একটা বলছিল যে it is coming, আমাদের real levels rise হবে, at some point আমাদের move করতে হবে, they have no options. So আমি চাচ্ছিলাম এই বিষয়টা ফোকাস করতে যে যারা যাবে বা যাদের যেতে হবে এইসব এরিয়া টার্গেট করে suppose we use AI and neural networking to predict those areas, the data, etc. And then we use the social media and apps to convey our message যে actually যাদেরকে যাওয়ার চান্স আছে, যাদের যেতে হবে, এদের কিভাবে যেতে হবে, কোথায় যেতে হবে, etc. And that's about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Good question. Is there anyone who wants to raise question from the screen? Any of our colleague before we close it? Looks no. Good. So we are, sorry. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Another interesting question. So it's not like that the sea level gonna rise overnight. In terms of statistically, in the Khulna Satkhira region, sea level is rising 6 to 7 millimeter per year. So you can imagine how small is 6 to 7 millimeter. But if you go to Chittagong and Cox's Bazar belt, their sea level is rising 10 to 11 millimeter. It's like almost 1 centimeter per year. So displacement due to sea level rise, yes, it's going to happen, but it's a very long process. It's going to happen over the next 30, 40, 50 years. So we don't need to further identify which location would be submerged is already identified, but where people would move, yes. For this, I think I kind of made a point when I was speaking that we need planned relocation guidelines. Where people would move, how they would move, what would be the facilities, what would be the modus operandi. And we would, currently we are trying to work with the government of Bangladesh to develop such planned relocation guidelines and standard operating procedures. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good point. With this, we are coming to an end. Let me quickly sort of share with you my takeaways. I'm sure that you have your own takeaways from here. The first takeaway that I see is that those who eventually get displaced provide services, immediate services and protection. So in 3 stages, as Ashfaq has rightly pointed out, if you want to stay, if you want to move, when you're on the move, and then whenever you go and stay somewhere else. So that's it's not certainly the same services that they need in 3 different situations. So that's one takeaway, that you have to immediately give protection in every sense to these people, and there are stories behind it as to how protections are often sort of backfires. So second is that these interventions has to be community based. There is no alternative. You can't run it from the capital of Bangladesh or anywhere else. Third is that invest in the people, which although wasn't spelled out, but it was always there. If the people are prepared to take risks, to face risks, there's nothing better than that. So that's the invest in people, make them capable, to empower them so that when the situation rises, they know how to tackle the way some of us are capable. Third is that I think in Bangladesh, at the national level, there are policies, but the policy continue to remain shelved at the national level. It doesn't get translated into the local level where it needs to. So we have seen that there is a national disaster management policy, which is a very good document. Some of us were party to it. It drafted through a very, very consultative process, because there wasn't a consensus within the government that we do need a policy for internal displacement, external of course, but not internal. But then they agreed. But the question is, the government has also kept a little bit of a budget for that, but it has not been able to translate in terms of priorities at the even at the district level. I'll not talk about the below district, sub-district level. So that's something we possibly need to look at. So these are my takeaway. Finally, if you put a frame around this takeaways, you'll see responding sensitively and based on people's well-being. I'll not even ask for rights. I'll talk about well-being. So responding based on sensitivity and well-being of people. So people shouldn't be removed if they don't want to get somewhere else. Strengthening resilience in terms of investment in people and capacity so that they can actually face the situation, and reducing vulnerability. That's much broader than displacement issues. And that concludes that it is the people who have to have the capacity to address the risks, the vulnerabilities, and the potentials. No one else can do on their behalf, not even NGOs. Thank you very much. Let me recognize, I should have done it earlier, the presence of our director, the SIPG, Professor Tawfiq, I know he's coming from a hospital from a very difficult situation, who she had to rush in the morning. So I hope things are going well. And we have also a very distinguished colleague of ours present here, Jamal Ahmed, who had worked in Bangladesh field levels and a very good understanding. Now he works out of Seattle. So I'm sure that he also got a little bit of an understanding how Bangladesh has moved in this particular area. With this, thank you very much. I know there is an announcement. So with that, we'll end. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, so thank you. And we will request our speakers, guests, and NSU faculty members to join us at the SIPG conference room, which is located at the 10th floor. And our students, please stay here. Thank you.